but a lot of people don't understand why. Like, why is it that they allow all these illegals in to do this stuff? And the answer is terribly simplistic and yet humanly complex. It's terribly simplistic in that basically, like the song said, his pleasure is our harm, right? I think most people don't understand the profoundness of that reality, that Satan's pleasure is our harm. And when you read Revelation 12, when he was thrown down at the ascension of Jesus Christ, when he was thrown down to the earth, and it says now he's bound to the earth. He can't go back up into heaven anymore like he did in Job's time. He's a prisoner here. And it says he's thrown down with great wrath because he knows his time is short. And so he's angry, and he hates you, and he hates me, but he can't kill you or touch you, right? He can't personally do anything to you. He has to solicit cooperation. He has to get you to cooperate with him through enticements, not only you, but the world itself. He can't just take over a human. Usually they have to invite him in. And so when people start messing around with Satan and his ways, and they invite him into their life, and he begins to torment them, now he's got them. He can use them as a vessel. A demon can come in or whatever. But as a child of God, we're protected, and he can't touch us. But what he can do is get to you through an individual, get to you through a friend, get to you through a family member. He can get to you through a group, an organization, or he can, if he gets enough people on his side in a government, he can get to you through the government. And because of the uniqueness of this government, it's taken him a lot longer and a lot harder. It's a lot harder for him, right, to get to us. Because he doesn't just he doesn't have sovereign power, Satan doesn't, in this country. Whereas in other countries, he can just dictate stuff. In this country, he's got to run it through all the, this vote and that vote and this thing. And so he kind of hides it behind bureaucracy and hides it behind all these little non-elected governing agencies that are getting now, at least some of them are getting flushed back out again. And that needs to happen, right? You don't need to reform things that have been broken for a long time. You need to get rid of them and evaluate whether you ever needed them in the first place. He will keep you thinking that you just need. It's funny to me that they'll make a law against laws, when in reality we just don't need the law at all. Right? We need a law to protect us against this. Well, guess what you just did? You put a law around yourself, right? What about just get rid of the laws? Like when Trump got rid of all the little restrictions and all the bureaucracy things of light bulbs and whatnot. They need to do the same thing with laws. Just go through all the laws that are technically made and get rid of all the laws that shouldn't be in existence. Again, I'll take being vulnerable and being free over being, so-called protected and having my freedoms taken away, right? Any day. Because from my experience and from if history's shown anything, when a people have the freedom without the fear of judgment of defending themselves, societies tend to behave more. If everybody's got a gun and is trained to use it, or a weapon and is trained to use it, people just don't mouth off quite so easily, do they? Back in the old days, they didn't have a gun. They would have what? They have a cane sword. right? And you want to mouth off, they'll duel you right there on the street and run you through, right? Slander or speaking harshly to someone, you might get in a duel. It's funny, if you want to kind of get a sobriety of that, just look up on YouTube 1800 duels or early 1900 duels. And it just shows you not only the sword duels, but the pistol duels. And because they recorded a lot of them, videoed them. They're silent, but nonetheless, you get a taste of what it was like back then. People didn't just mouth off. You slander somebody, you speak against somebody, they might knock on your door and challenge you to a duel. It's like, oh, you want to die today? People behave more when there was actual threat from the human that they're disbehaving against. Yeah, there were consequences. And so the government wants to say, oh, we'll protect you so you don't have to duel. That's such a tumultuous thing, such a terrible thing. And it is a terrible thing. But I don't want the government's protection, because the more they try to protect, the more they restrict, the more they confine, the more they begin to control, right? And I know, and you should know, who is behind the government. Who's behind the government? Who's the man, right? Satan. He is the actual leader of every government on the earth because he is the God of this world. And we've been transferred out of the kingdom of darkness, authoritatively from his being able to touch us, into the kingdom of his beloved Son. So we're in a different dominion now from a spiritual standpoint, but our flesh is still left here on this one. And it's foolish to just let him rule in such a way in your own government, in your own world, and be ignorant to it. You're just begging for him to take over your life, right? If you're ignorant of how this works, just go throughout history, right? Look at what happened to Rome. Then look at what's happening to England right now and Germany. Look at what's happening to France. Look at what's happening all throughout all the European countries who have bought into the satanic nonsense of letting a bunch of illegal immigrants into their country, doing nothing to stop their bad behavior. And their bad behavior, by the way, is beheading people in the streets of the UK, the United Kingdom, like, a civilized place. But if a citizen of the United Kingdom even carries a screwdriver in public, they can be arrested and put in jail to protect themselves. Yeah, it's illegal. And if they complain about it, they can be put in jail. And not can, but have been put in jail. So whatever's happening there is they tried to do here. And we should thank God every day that Trump got elected, or we would be halfway there already. Both times. It's so much more like we're blessed because we think it could not hit us, right? And we could just leave and go to another state. Well, there's only so many states that you can leave from until you can't leave anymore, and it's over, right? Because if it would have continued, that's the way it would have went. Or even worse, you would have entered into some civil war thing, and don't think that would have been pretty. That would have been quite an interesting thing. So Satan would have, if he got permission, and he did have permission already to bring the UN troops over, right? You think, oh well, the West, or the Southerners got plenty of guns, and we would fight and win. Against our own peoples, we would win easily. But against UN military coming in, maybe not so easily, right? It would have been Wolverine, Red Dawn. So we do actually live in a sober time, and we celebrate our feeling of freedom here in Tennessee. I say feeling of freedom because we're still, like I said, we're so far away from enjoying the freedoms that we should actually constitutionally enjoy. But nonetheless, we're better off than not only a lot of countries, but a lot of states in our country. So it's relevant. It's very relevant. And that's what makes it difficult for us. Look at Romans 13. When we do recognize the authority that we've been talking about in the U.S., we're talking about faith and walking by faith. What do I believe about our government? Do I believe our government is like other governments? Or do I believe our government is different and like no other? And I'm supposed to, by faith, if I'm to honor Jesus Christ, I should be trying to represent our government properly and holding the officials accountable to that. And that's why the voices being lifted up are so important. It's the irony that Satan, I think, thought the internet would be the thing that really wrecked humanity, and it's also the thing that exposed him the most. And people have become more aware of the depth of his activity and the depth of the darkness of his activity through the means of the internet. So it's both a blessing and a curse. The blessing is now you know. The curse is now you know. You'll never be innocent again in your mind, understanding the dark things that Satan has done and is doing. And they are quite dark. So you have a text like Romans 13 for us where it says, every person is, verse 1, every person to be in subjection to the governing authorities. There's no authority except from God, and those who are established by God. And that's true. And the irony is we have this thing called the Constitution. And so if I believe by faith that I'm going to worship Jesus Christ in my country, then I have to think and understand the Constitution, and which is not terribly long. It's worth reading a few times, getting a grip on it. And then at least, because at this point the Constitution has been overrun, but at least when you vote and they're bringing up these bills and these things for you to vote upon, you will understand what the Constitution says we should have for freedoms. And then you'll know how to vote. Even if you think, oh, that sounds good, you'll know if it's really good because it either supports the Constitution that Jesus Christ put in place or it doesn't. And if it does, then you can vote for it. If it doesn't, then don't. People vote for convenience and for protection and for ease. And that is a dumb way to vote. That's the slippery slope to full and utter control by Satan through evil men in this world. And you can't, in faith, worship Jesus Christ by voting, because we do worship Jesus Christ when we vote. It is an act of worship. You can't, in faith, worship Jesus Christ and be ignorant, especially if he's given you every opportunity to be informed. That's why Beth's always got her notebook. She's like, okay, this is this bill and this is that bill, and, you know, see this sneaky language in this one? That's where they get you, you know. She's usually on top of things. And so we think, when Paul wrote this, he was speaking of governing authorities as people, because the governing authorities were men who were seen as sons of the gods or a god himself. And so you worship, you served this Caesar, this leader. And the believers had to serve him as if he's Christ, but without worshiping as if he were God, which is what got a lot of them killed. But we don't have that situation where we have a man who's seen as the head God, we have a piece of paper that rules over all the men. And that's interesting. And it breaks it down into the three areas of rule, and from there it goes on, right? So we have to be aware of how Satan works. We have to be aware of what his activity is. And when you vote because you believe something based upon information, so that you're voting as a true act of worship, not voting for the progress of one man's idea, but rather for the authority. In other words, I believe Jesus put us under the authority of the Constitution. And so I want to support that because that's what Jesus put in place. And if you look at it, Satan's constantly trying to get us away from that. Because if he can get us away from that, he can get us away from our freedoms. They were so close to getting full power. What were they talking about doing during Biden's term? Updating the Constitution. And by updating, they mean changing it, right? Getting rid of things that would give us freedoms, such as, what would be the first thing they were seeking to change? No. What? First Amendment. Freedom of speech, right? Freedom of speech. What is it? No, well, but they were proactively working on more than guns. Was they were censoring, right? They were speech on all the platforms. So much so that they even took, what was that one? What was the one that they shut down and wouldn't let anybody download the? No, start with the P. Parler. Remember how Parler was going to rise up and take over, maybe say compete with Instagram or something of that nature, and they shut down the ability to even download the app and shut down attacked it. Like, that was intense attacks, right? And then they, of course, anything you said that they didn't like on YouTube or Instagram or all these types of things, they were doing the same thing there. That's what I mean, during COVID, before COVID, and even now. And so it just depends, and that's why people use all these new weird languages that people are speaking, right? This unaliving or whatever. I'm like, what did he just say? Unalived himself. Yeah, if you talk about certain people's names, you have to use code words, right? The jab or unalive or something of that nature that's going on in this world. And then they'll try to cut you out for even saying that. So they just keep changing the vocabulary in order to try to keep speaking about topics that these platforms don't want you to speak about. That's what they were trying to do, and they did it by saying, well, they have this special permission, they got to protect the public from certain, evil things. And what they meant was like pedophilia and things like that, by which some of them were not protecting the public from pedophilia. They were protecting the public from hearing about the truth about various topics that were politically or culturally there for people to hear, and they were just squelching it out. And they still are today. Again, people go to jail in the UK. Like, Satan has accomplished this in the UK. In fact, if I went to the UK, if this message was heard, they would either try to put me in jail in the UK or extradite me back to the US or send me back to the US and kick me out of the UK. I would not be allowed anymore. Like, where I used to just go to the bike race, whatever. I would be concerned 100% that I would be arrested if I went into the airport in London or in Germany. And that's crazy. Like, I never thought that a day in my life. You can't speak about what the Word of God says about homosexuality. You can't speak about what God says about prayer and how the UK is violating that, right? About the fact that they're breaking their own laws by letting illegals in that are forming gangs and murdering people and raping people and kidnapping people in the streets, and they don't get penalized really for it in any kind of significant way on a big scale. Those types of things are crazy. And it's like it's a madhouse, right? It's amazing. And that's what they were trying to do here. And you say, why? Why would they do that? Aren't they smart? No, they're satanically committed. Right? Those at the top are committed to a satanic ambition, a satanic administration. They just are. And they know it at this point, by the way. This is not hidden. They're not stupid, and they're not ignorant of who they serve. At this point in the game, everybody at the top knows who they serve. And so it is truly a spiritual warfare where you are fighting angels with your votes. You're fighting angels with your voice. We're not fighting men right now. We're fighting angels. We're fighting Satan. And though God in his compassion heard our prayers and blessed us with stopping their conniving ways enough to get a clean vote in so that we could have the person that America voted in, all he's doing is planning part 2, right? Who's next coming up? So just to back up what Jeff said, people often say, well, the pulpit's not supposed to be political. Of course it is. What do you think Romans 3 is? Or 13, excuse me, Romans 13. 1 Peter chapter 2. It's talking about how to relate to the government. That being said, when it comes to being at peace, we're supposed to have a love for the people, even though they're wickedly evil. That is to say, you love them by wishing well for them, blessing them, praying a blessing for them. Even the most wicked of people, I pray a blessing for them. I pray that they get saved. Because if they get saved, they become my brother and your brother, my sister and your sister. And we get to rejoice with them in heaven, even though they've probably done horrible, horrible atrocities. And so I look forward to seeing some of those people who have been saved, been made new creations, become children of God, you'll probably see them in heaven low, right? They'll be like bowing down and worshiping and giving thanks. Where a lot of us will be like, sweet, we're here. This is awesome. You'll see people who are in Hamas or in these terrible cults, in these terrible religions, doing horrible, horrible things to humanity. In politics, doing horrible, horrible things to humanity. If they get saved, you're going to see them really, really, really give thanks. Like, to much is forgiven. The one who's forgiven much loves much. And so I hope to see a lot of people who have been forgiven much in heaven. But that doesn't mean you don't speak against them. Doesn't mean you don't expose them. To bless someone does not mean to show to bless someone doesn't mean to support them. To bless someone means to wish good things for them. Right? That's what it means. It doesn't mean that you lay back and say, well, God's in charge. Yeah, the God of this world's in charge. And if you don't vote him out, he'll just gladly take over. And so, let's hold it to the end. So this is an important topic. But in my doings, however, that doesn't mean that when you're speaking to authorities, you're disrespectful. You often see in movies and whatnot. I think there was a Joseph movie once where Joseph was like, I only bow to God. Like, that's absurd. You give honor to whom honor is due. Custom to whom custom, fear to whom fear. Custom to whom custom. Joseph actually bowed down in the text to the Pharaoh. Daniel bowed down to Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego bowed down, not to worship, but to pay proper honor or respect or custom to the king. People bowed low in the past because that was the way you did it. You bowed low today to someone in authority, it would be weird, right? They might think you're trying to get something up on them. Cop pulls you over, you're like, yes, my lord. You know, he's been like, get up, dude. You know, what's you freaking me out? We don't have that custom in our society, but we say sir or magistrate or judge or whatever it is. You give them their proper title, their proper honor. You can stand against someone and still be respectful and kind, but yet still be a rock and solid and strong. You don't have to be nasty or equal in their evil in order to stand against them. You just have to be strong. And that's what God calls us to do. He goes down, you know the rest of this, I'll read it real quick. Verse 2, it says, therefore whoever resists authority has opposed the ordinance of God, and they who oppose will receive condemnation upon themselves. For rulers are not a cause for fear, a fear for good behavior. That's why I said, I'm going to add the words, in general, but for evil. Do you want to have no fear of authority? Do what is good, and you will have praise from the same. In general, not always, right? Depends on how dark the government has turned. For it is supposed to be, you kind of got to add that in there nowadays, right? Or it is a minister of God to you for good. It is supposed to be a minister of God for you for good. But if you do what is evil, be afraid, for it does not bear the sword for nothing. For it is a minister of God, an avenger who brings wrath on the ones who practice evil. And unfortunately, in places like Europe and the UK and whatnot today, and even in Canada, they punish people for doing good, and they reward evil. Even in our own country, in places like California and other places. They reward the person who smashes and grabs and goes in and steals. And if the security man tries to stop them and they say they're harmed, they could sue him. It's backwards. But this is the way God intended it to be. Unfortunately, it's not always that way. Therefore, it is necessary to be in subjection, not only because of wrath, but also for conscience sake. Now, in our little part of the world here in Tennessee, we're kind of in this context where we do have people. I think most of the police officers around here, though some of them might be a little Barney Fifey, you know, some of them are a little too quick for the to want to be a judge of righteousness on somebody, as all cops struggle with their personal emotions, their feelings, their family life, how happy they are in their life, whether they're a bully. But I think most of them are just dudes just trying to do a good job, at least the ones I've run into. And I'm always polite and kind. How you doing, brother? You know, what's going on? Da-da-da-da, if I ever get pulled over. And you don't have to show them your ID and all this stuff. You can play that game, or if you know you have nothing to hide, you can just make their life easy and show them your ID and go through the whole rigmarole and drive away. Because there are some like, well, according to the Constitution, I have a right to travel and blah, 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 blah. It's like, yeah, but these dudes don't play that on that game. They work for the corporation of the United States of America, and specifically underneath the local company that the police station has become, and they're just looking to go according to the way they know how to do it. And if I have nothing to hide, I don't care if I play their game just long enough to let them be happy and move on. You don't have to be cantankerous every time. However, you can, if you really care, you can write down some truth for them on the Constitution and say, here's all my stuff. And by the way, here's some information on the Constitution that might help you when you're doing your job if you wanted to, if it really meant something to you, in that way, to educate them, which is not a bad idea. I've seen some people go and ask cops what the first few, just give me the first 5 constitutional amendments, and they're like, they don't even know hardly anything. And it's pretty crazy because they swear to uphold the Constitution, right? And yet then they go out and violate the Constitution based upon the city ordinances. And why do they do that? Because they're ignorant, right? Or they just don't care. And they've dreamt as a little kid of being a police officer. And now that's what they do. They go out and they say, yes, sir, to their person, and the person above them says, you do this, and they say, okay, and that's what they do. And the only hope of ever helping a society turn around is to inform them, right, to educate them. John asked me the other day, he goes, okay, I know what the technical details on World War II are about, but will you tell me the truth now? Give me the real history. I think it was World War II, wasn't it? And so we were talking about some of the real issues behind World War II, and what really propagated it. Satan starts wars because he likes to kill humans. It's one of his best and easiest ploys is to say, oh, there's a country that's being bad. Let's go stomp them out. And he uses countries like America and others that are big and strong and all that. He'll pump them up with this angel of light discussion on why we should go beat them up and give them a big spanking. And then sends us over there just to wax out a bunch of people. And why? Because of an ideology? No. Because Satan just had it in his heart to try to kill as many people as he could before the American people get sick of it, or whatever other nation's doing to get sick of it, and say, you guys need to stop. This is ridiculous. And finally the government says, well, there's enough people saying we need to stop. I guess we should stop now. We're going to get voted out of office. That's why a voice actually matters. Because if you don't speak up, Satan, he's got the government at his disposal to use to murder as many people as he wants to murder, and whatever weird self-justifications he wants to do, with whatever lies he wants to tell. Everything has been lies, right? The reason why we went to the Vietnam War, the reason why we went to the Korean War, the reasons why we went to Iraq, and everybody knows it now. It's all lies. And a lot of the military knows it now. So they'll be like, dude, so why am I, what am I doing? It used to be a dream, to go, I want to be a soldier and do good for the world and do good for my country. And now you realize, oh, I'm really just a mercenary. Not them in their hearts, not in their own integrity, but the way they're being utilized. And that's kind of demoralizing. And so it's unfortunate. We live in a time where Satan has such a grip on the world. But on the one hand, on the other hand, we know about it. We can speak about it. Think of even the Epstein thing that was recent. When Trump tried to sweep that, maybe he had his reasons. Maybe he was going to pull it back out of his pocket later. Who knows? But everybody spoke up against it. And so it was like, oh, I guess we're not going to ignore this. And it does matter. And it does matter. Because I want to know that if somebody took my daughter, kidnapped her, or seduced her into some kind of scheme, tricked her into getting on a plane, taking her to an island, and then she was utilized as a resource for some pleasure for many men, an expendable product, I would hope that not just the man who did it, but those who participated would be held accountable, right? And I think that's why American people care about such things, when it's your own, when it's people, right? When it's your people. And so it is important to speak up. If I've learned anything, I've learned that in the past few years more than anything, is that when people speak up loud a lot, it actually does force the politicians to have some integrity and get involved. And that's amazing to me. Like, that's it? So your integrity is based upon how many people and how loud they scream? Like, okay, you guys are terrible. But if that's the game, I guess that's the game, right? You speak up, you get traction, and then all of a sudden now you have some sense of forward progress to get maybe 10% of the truth out. Maybe. Because the real truth is so dark, most people couldn't even stomach it. It's horrible. However, he says, render, verse 7. Verse 6, he says, because of this you pay taxes, for rulers are servants of God, devoting themselves to this very thing. Yeah, and I want those who are supposed to be in ruling positions to buy milk for their kids and have homes and be able to afford a car and pay for things and go on vacations and enjoy their life. So I understand that part of it. Then he says, render to what is due to them, tax to whom tax. He says, custom to whom custom, fear to whom fear, and honor to whom honor. Then he says this, owe nothing to anyone except to love one another, for he who loves his neighbor has fulfilled the law. And so that's the point, right? Is I want to resist Satan, but love those in the government who are even serving Satan by praying for their salvation, wishing well to them, being kind but yet strong, which being strong sometimes looks unkind. But nonetheless, verse 10, if you skip down, just for the sake of flow, love does no wrong to a neighbor, therefore love is the fulfillment of the law. This is the goal. The goal is to figure out how to stand strong, have a passionate stance against evil, stand against Satan and the evil one, and still somehow continue to express love toward those people, which they may not see as love. If you bless someone and you say, hey, I pray blessings to you. I pray God save you. Pray God love you. Pray God draw you to himself. They may scoff at that and sneer at that and not even like it. But as far as your heart's concerned, you've done well. You pray God give them happy life. Like I said, I always pray God give everybody a happy life, that he would bless their life and their marriage and their relationship with their children and their grandchildren. But if they're evil, I pray that he do no good to allow any good thing to happen in their evil endeavors. In other words, that all of their evil will be thwarted and be blocked, and they would fall on their face in that respect. But if they fall on their face, may it result in a blessing of them being self-aware of the evil they do, and that they would wake up and repent, confess their sins, and walk in forgiveness and newness of life. That would be the goal, right? So the goal is to stand, but it's also to pray genuinely from the heart for their salvation. Because that's what has to happen. People often don't care so much until it hits them, right? Or it hits some group that they're associated with. I even think of the Gaza thing that's going on down there. Nobody thought much about it, or people who were supporting it all of a sudden got upset when a church was hit. The only church in Gaza. They got hit by Israel, and all of a sudden now people are upset. It's like, you're upset because a building died rather than people dying? Of course, there were people in the building that did die, but, they attacked a church. What's the Word of God say about a church? Who's the church? You're the church, right? They shot a building, an old building, the only one like it. How dare they? Now you've done it. You've went too far. You shot the building. Now, human lives now, we don't care so much about them. But the building, that's just a step too far because it has a cross on it. You shot the dadgum building. Now it's on. So it's that weird thing where it's like, because somebody's upset and because the group they're associated with got their building shot. It's that you have to think sober-minded. It's like, what's reality? No. There's evil going on both sides, and people are dying, and it's just horrible, right? It's very hard in war to discern between good and evil. And though they're trying to do some good things, there's also a lot of evil things happening in any war, in any time. On both sides. Imagine if one soldier assumes that you're a combatant and all you're trying to do is run across the street and save your kid. And then you have to shoot to save your kid because they're shooting over there toward your kid. And now they think you're a combatant because you're just caught in the crossfires. I mean, there's so much evil that goes down and so much confusion that goes down in those types of things. And that's why it's like, pray blessing for them, pray salvation. Because pray God give them visions and dreams. Because what else are they going to get right now? They're not going to get a group of people with Bibles showing up. You know that a boat was attacked the other day? You know, that there's more than one that's been attacked, but a humanitarian boat was taking some things over there, and the boat was shot at and blown up, caught on fire. And the lady was like, well, we just got attacked, and our boat's on fire, and it's sinking, you know. And so she was just getting out there. And so it's like they're not allowing any aid, and I understand, but I don't understand. Like, I understand you're giving the enemy food. On the other hand, you're actually keeping food from the common people. Those are very difficult things to understand. What would you do, right? It's almost impossible to discern what you would do if you were in either situation, sitting here. So about the best thing and the only thing we can do for them is pray for them, because you can't get in the middle of the two groups battling and say, all right, let's just calm down, shall we? They're not going to right now. So you just pray for them. You pray blessing for them. You pray blessing for our government, our leaders, those who have been elected. Not because they deserve it, but because I was God's enemy once, and now I am not. Look at Peter. 1 Peter. Chapter 3. It's in the same context of authority. Comes out of chapter 2, verse 13, submitting to the authorities. Chapter 3, husbands, wives. And then he says this, it's much like Romans, where it switches in this. You're talking about authority out of the gospel. The gospel's in chapter 1 and 2. You're this royal priesthood, this chosen race, this people for God's own possession. out of the good news of being born of the imperishable seed, having the sanctifying work of the Holy Spirit cleanse your conscience from dead works to serve the living God, having your sins paid for and redeemed, and all this stuff in chapter 1 there. And then he goes into authority, and then he just switches. But it's not a switch, because this is what would be logical to someone who's thinking in terms of, how do I apply my faith and love in these contexts out of understanding the gospel? That's what it's to sum up. When he says to sum up, like when you're in authority, you're dealing with authority, what would be the sum thought in my head when I'm dealing with an authority? All of you be harmonious, right? In other words, the children of God be harmonious in this truth. Sympathetic. I can be sympathetic. I was lost once. If a police officer's acting ungodly and they're lost, I was lost once. I've been ignorant. I've been wrong in my judgments. I've been foolish in my emotions. I can be sympathetic toward people. So don't let their energy that's negative pull you up, and then you match their negative energy. Be brotherly. That's why anytime I ever do get pulled over, I'm like, hey, brother, what's up? Because I see everybody as my brother. We all come from Adam. Everybody's my brother. Kind-hearted. Humble in spirit. It means recognizing where you are in the authoritative structure. Not returning evil for evil or insult for insult, because sometimes they will provoke you to do evil through insulting you. But giving a blessing instead. When someone says something to provoke you to evil or insult you, wish them well. Pray a blessing for them. Give a blessing to them. That always throws people off. They're insulting you, and you say, I pray that God give you a good life, happiness in your home, provisions for your family. I pray that He draw you to Him, that He saves you. You want to throw somebody off the insult train, that'll do it. They might start yelling at you. All the more. And here's the point. The reason why you would bless them, even though you might hate them, and rightly so. People say you should never hate the sinner. You hate the sin and love the sinner. Nonsense. You hate the sin, you hate the sinner, but you show them love. There's no way you can separate the sinner from the sin. Mathematically do that. Where does the sin come from within? The H-E, right? The heart. The heart. It comes from within the heart. So, can I separate the sin from the sinner's heart? You can't separate the source or the sin from the source of the sin. It's coming out of the very soul, the suke, the pneuma of the very being through the flesh. The sin doesn't somehow float around in air and then they just grab a hold and choose to grab it, or they're a victim all of a sudden. Oh, I was just overcome. Sin comes from within the heart of the sinner, comes from the flesh of the saint. You can't separate that. You can't say, well, I love them. Oh, you love them. You love their wicked heart and their fallen flesh? No, it's nonsense. It's just jibber-jabber because somebody wants to be the bigger person or wants to somehow act more like God. They're just ignorant children playing in the playground, having no idea what they're doing. God hates but the sinner. This is clear. They're His enemy. But He loves His creation. He loves all men because He's the creator of men. But individually, He will hate that sinner and yet still show them love, as he says, does not the sun rise and fall upon the just and the unjust? Does not the rain come upon the just and the unjust? Does not God show love to everyone? Of course he does, because he still hopes for the bigger picture. Like he said in the Old Testament, why will you die? Why will you go toward your death? He might hate them, but that doesn't mean he doesn't want to show them love and want to bless them, so that then he can enter into a love relationship with them as his children. And though I might be disgusted with the human in front of me, if they're evil, in my mind, I can compartmentalize the fact that they need to be saved. All the issues go away if their soul is circumcised out of them and replaced by being born from above, being a new creation. Therefore, my heart then is to go right here in verse 9, I was called for the very purpose that I might inherit a blessing. Therefore, I am to bless the people whom I don't like, or who are mean, or who are evil. And it does take an act of faith for me to do it. Because there are some politicians and some people in this world that are so disgusting and have done such deplorable and horrible things that I do not want them initially. I want the ground, like the rebellion of Korah. I want the ground to open up and smash them on public TV, and God from heaven to say, that's what you get, you wicked person. That's what I want, right? It's truly what I want. And that would be nice. Like, that would be being easy upon them. But what I choose to give, because I was an enemy of God and I was opposed to his word, whether I knew it or not was irrelevant. Whether I understood the details of that not is irrelevant. Because I grew up ignorant, I myself know that I just needed salvation, right? And I went from not knowing God and pursuing my own life and the sins that were developing in my life, to loving God with all my heart, soul, mind, and strength, having a spirit inside of me, causing me to walk in his ways, loving the brethren, and wanting to know him and worship him. That is just the weirdest shift ever. How do you go from being so or I wouldn't say anti-God, I'd say empty of God's life in your life? I didn't have a religious life. To, he is my whole life. And it was just because I recognized the work that he did, I confessed it, he made me a new creation, he forgave me of my sins, made me a new creation, put his spirit within me, and all of that results in now he is my life. That can happen to anyone. I'm confident God was not smiling at my life, nor was he happy with me in some kind of way. I was his enemy, he says. While we're yet enemies, Christ died for us. I'm sure Jesus didn't just love those that were the children of the devil that sought to kill him. He had no emotions of happiness to them when he called them vipers and a den of vipers and snakes, right? He wasn't saying, oh, my beloved snake group and den of vipers. Well, it's going to be bad for you one day, my love, when the fires of hell come upon you. In fact, I love you so much, I'm going to call Moses out of the stands in John 5. He said, to judge you, he will be your accuser, not me, because I love you so much. This absurdity. What in the world are people thinking? Jesus felt feelings of hatred and anger and fire in his eyes for the person. As God did in the Old Testament, so easily seen by the simple Romans 9 statement, Isaac I loved and Esau I hated. He didn't say the sins of Esau, because Esau was a baby. What he's saying is he was intending to set, he was set his choice of love upon this one, and the other one, whether if he got saved, he would become his child and he would love him. And so it's not a matter of how palatable you are as a human. It's about the fact that I'm just born into sin. God saves us, even though we are that person. Look at verse 10. He says, chapter 3 of 1 Peter, the one who desires life, to love and to see good days, must keep his tongue from evil and lips from speaking deceit. You keep it from evil. That's the one we might fall into more than the deceit one. As children of God, evil means you might just sass mouth back, right? You might enter into the insults. You must turn away from evil and do good. Of course, these are Old Testament quotes, Psalm 34. He must seek peace and pursue it. That's why I said it's like, in what way can I make this a peaceful exchange between me and the authority that I'm interacting with right now? For the eyes of the Lord are toward the righteous. It's right to be peaceful. It's right to pray a blessing. It's right to do right. It's right to do good. And he and his ears attend to their prayers. But the face of the Lord is against those who do evil. And that's even us. Who is there to harm you if you prove zealous for what is good? But then he thankfully, he adds in stuff that we might be going through. But even if you should suffer for the sake of righteousness, you are blessed. He's mimicking what Jesus said in Matthew. And do not fear their intimidation, and do not be troubled. But he says this, but set Christ as Lord apart in your hearts, right? To sanctify Christ in your heart is to set Christ apart as the Lord in your hearts. And if the Lord says, I need to bless this person when they insult me, that's what I shall do. If the Lord says, I shall try to make peace in a time where I want to argue and punch this person or resist this person in some way, I will seek to make peace. Because you'll find righteous reasons to be unpeaceful. You should stand. You should inform. You should make your voice known. You should be informed. I think the best way to get familiar with anything, like I did in seminary, when I needed to memorize something, I read it 5 times in a row. And I read it out loud, and I read it as if I'd read it for the first time, and I read it demonstratively. You don't read it, you need all your senses working. You need your mouth to be heard by your ears. So you have your eyes, you have your body being used, you have your ears taking it back in. So you read it theatrically out loud 5 times, and you will recall much of what you read for a very long time. Just 5 times. I could read something 5 times, go in and literally like mirror it word for word almost on a test. But you have to read it not like, in the same way you want to be submissive to your own husband. No. It's like, in the same way, you wives, be submissive to your own husbands, so that even in the thing in which anything that's disobedient to the word, if any of them are disobedient, they may be won without a word by the behavior of their wives. You read that whole section 5 times theatrically, out loud, emotionally. It begins to set in. It begins to take root, right? Say, not returning evil for evil, but insult for insult, but giving a blessing instead, for you were called for their purpose, that you might inherit a blessing. You read that 5 times theatrically. You interact with it. You engage with it. It begins to overcome your flesh and become a part of you. That's just my advice. So if you want to be familiar with the Word, do the same. You want to be familiar with the Constitution, do the same. You say, well, I read it, it's just boring. Well, read it with the purpose of actually getting to know the fact that that is the document that Jesus Christ, in his compassion and mercy, put over us as our Lord on earth. It's not a human, it's a paper. But it is, in fact, the Lord. You call it the Lord Constitution. It is the little Lord, the Lord under the Lord. Right? We don't have a dictator or something like that. We have representatives of the Lord paper. Right? So the Constitution is the Lord paper. So if you want to get to know your authority, read it 5 times. And you can throw in there some of the other documents as well, if you wanted to, but the Constitution is the most important, so that at least you know what it says. So you know how to represent it in your heart. You know how to speak it gently and strong, if you need to. How to encourage people. And that's what it means to sanctify Christ as Lord in my heart. If Christ is Lord, then what's the paperwork he's given me to follow? Can I set Christ apart as Lord in my heart if I don't know his word? No. You can do it idealistically, but not practically. You're going to miss it. And if you don't know the document, he says, subject yourselves to the governing authorities. Who's the governing authority? The document. Right? And so if the document is the governing authority, then I should get to know this document that's sort of a living dead person in order to subject myself to the Lord's authority. And if you want to throw in there the Bill of Rights, you can toss those in too. Would be helpful. And so those are the things that you have to kind of know in order to subject to the Lord. Otherwise, you're easy prey, right? Have you ever seen movies where they'll take the new guy and tell him the boss wants him to do something? And it's the opposite of what the boss wants him to do. And it's always this joke, right? You know, they're like, oh, there's the new guy at the car dealership working here. Yeah, the boss said, take this car out of the showroom and take it out and wash it. He cranks it up, and the boss, what the hell, you're cranking up a car in the showroom? Everybody's around here. What's going on? He's like, you know, they're laughing at the dude. You know, he's the new guy, right? They're roasting him. Well, that's what can happen to you in the world from an authority if you don't know the actual authority. In other words, you're the dummy because you don't know what to stand on. You're just listening to the peers. You're just listening to the people that might have some seniority in society, but you don't know. And so if you don't know, you're going to get tricked. You're going to get deceived. They'll say, vote like this. You're like, okay. Yeah. It's like Satan's like, yes, here's the cookie. And so we don't want to be the dumb guy. We don't get to be easily roasted. You want to know how to set the Lord apart, Jesus Christ as Lord in your hearts. How do I set him apart? Right? How do I set the Lord apart if I'm a man leading a home? What's the truth? I said it last week, but we'll test you. What's the truth base that I set apart in my heart? The number one truth base I set apart in my heart above all things that guides me on walking with God as a man and leading my life and my home. What's the number one truth? Anybody know? The creative order. Tony and you win. You guys are linked up over here. In other words, God made man for himself. Right? That's the truth base. That's the Constitution in my head. God made man to represent him on the earth, waited a day, and then created woman to help him after he already established him in what he wanted him, how he wanted him to follow him. So the truth base. So if somebody comes to me and says, well, you know, your wife is your teammate, your partner. It's like, no, she's there to help. Partner assumes equal authority. We partner. I'm a partner in the divine nature. Do I have the ability to create worlds? No. So I'm not a partner of God. I'm a partnering partner, and I'm partner in his nature, but I'm not partner with the Father. Right? I'm a co-heir of Jesus Christ. Does that mean that he and I are equal in lordship? No. I'm a co-heir. I'm not a co-lordship. So God set Christ apart to follow him, and I follow Christ, right? He's the firstborn among many brethren. My job is to follow him, and then he creates a woman to support that following as a unit, and it feels like a partnership. It feels like a team. It feels wonderful because there's friendship and love and happiness and support and all this stuff, but it's not. In the same way that I don't ever really feel the heaviness of Jesus' authority over my life. I feel like he's my friend and he's my brother and he's helping me and I know he's Lord, but I don't really feel the heaviness of his lordship. I never do. I never really have. Because I love him and I kind of serve him out of that. I don't serve him because I'm like, oh, Lord, you're so authoritative, you know, so mighty. And I don't want to be squashed, you know, by this evil bee. I think of Jesus as the one I love, the one that died for me, the one whose love can't be separated from me, surpassing greatness of his love, and I love him back, and I want him to be pleased with my life. So, yes, I understand he's Lord, but I function as a person in love toward him. So I don't just feel that, well, I don't feel that the wasps are trying to get us. I don't feel heavy in respect to his authority in my life. In the same way that if it's a proper marriage, the husband's going to lead and the wife's going to follow, and it doesn't feel heavy if she seeks to love and support the husband because he's seeking to love and support Christ. It's only when people throw out these things and thinking, what's the number one thing if I'm a wife? Oh, dear. Let me know. Just somebody warn me. All right, he's coming my way. We have a wild one here today. What's the number one thing in a wife's mind that would hold her accountable? What's the constitution that she's to set Christ apart as Lord in her heart when it comes to supporting her husband? What would be the number one thing? What? The creative order, same thing, right? But the second part of Genesis, where he created the woman from the rib to then be a helpmate or a support to the husband. And so that would be hers. It's a very small bit of information. So everything comes out of that, right? Everything comes out of that. But then you can add to it, oh, but she's to do it as unto the Lord. So that's part 2, right? So Ephesians 5, 1 Peter. So that means that what if the support, the one you're supposed to support, asks you to do something evil? Well, no, you wouldn't do it. Why? Because you're supposed to serve him as unto the Lord. Well, if he's asking you to do something evil, then you can say, no, this was unrighteous. It's objective. It's inappropriate. And God will stand with you and God will fight with you, right? And so your main truth base is, in general, if it's subjective, you just go along with the husband even if you don't understand, if you don't like it, if you are uncomfortable, if you're not familiar. Because the world has done a really good job, Satan's done a really good job at confusing the church on what it means to be a man. So men just don't even know what it means to be a man. They're terrified to be a man. They're terrified to lead their homes. They'll be called misogynists or something of that nature. And Satan has won that cultural battle in our culture today. We can get it back, But it's only going to be through the church that it actually gets brought back properly. Now, I don't see a big enough movement in the church to actually bring it back anytime soon. But that's what I mean. It's like, how do I set Christ apart as Lord in my heart? How do I do that? Well, I do it by saying, what information has Jesus articulated for me to follow him properly on the earth and not be tricked by Satan's schemes of light that look good and look right but are not? Because we're not going to get deceived by dark schemes. We're going to get deceived by the one masquerading as an angel of light. That's where we get tricked, and that's where we get easily taken off of our game. And so that last part, sanctify Christ as Lord in your hearts, always being ready to make a defense to everyone who asks you to give an account of the hope that is in you, yet with gentleness and reverence. In other words, when somebody says, well, why would you treat your husband that way? Why would you subject, because that's the creative order. Why do you think you should lead your family that way? Because that's the creative order. Right? That's the base, the truth base. Why is it that marriage is between a man and a woman? It's creative order, right? That's the way God created it. Whereas marriage literally was created by God at the creation of man and woman. So why would I not support it between other by same genders? Because it's not the way God created it. And so therefore, it doesn't matter what somebody feels. Marriage itself was brought into existence by God in Genesis. All that people are doing when they say that they want to get married that are the same gender are defiling God's institution that he established in Genesis. And I say that because they're recognizing the marriage is a thing. Without God, marriage would never be a thing. Right? Without God, if you take a primitive Neanderthal peoples out in the middle of nowhere, it's just, you're my woman and I might grab you too, you know? And it's just whatever woman some dude wants, he just grabs her, and if she runs off at some point, but he's going to grab women, right, and do what he wants to do. Marriage was instituted at creation by God, and so to say, hey, you want to be with someone, you want to stay with them, that's established by God as an institution of truth, not an institution by state law, but an institution of truth that God established for the homosexual world and all this stuff to hijack that is to specifically and intentionally pervert an institution of God. That's why you give an account for it. It's wrong because it's God's institution and you're trying to pervert it. Like the rainbow. They even claim that. Well, that's enough for this morning, but leave you with that. Seek to learn what it means to set Christ as Lord apart in your heart so that you have an excuse. And the way you do that is through information, either truth in the Bible or the information that the Bible would say we would need to know outside of the Bible. And there is information we need to know that's outside of the Bible, such as how to take care of your body and things like that, right? All kinds of things. With that, let me, I'll close the prayer and then we'll take your question real quick. Let me just, hold on a second, Jeff. Let me pray and then we'll do it. We'll still wait. All right. Lord, thank you so much for this time. Pray your blessings on it. Pray that you would help us to mature and grow and set you apart as Lord in our heart so that we know how to give an answer to those. That we would truly care about these things that none of us really want to have to deal with. I know I don't. But it is our responsibility, and we are in this world, and this is our calling as your children to represent you in the world the best we can. Give us the ability to love deeply, to be sympathetic and kind-hearted and brotherly to all people, be peaceful with all people, that as much as is possible with us. And yet to stand strong, vigilant, powerful, passionate against evil and against evil things, evil ideologies, evil deeds. Give us the wisdom to know how to pray a blessing for those who are doing evil. And God, I pray that you would transform our minds to remember all these things. Give us a knowledge and wisdom and understanding. Give us remembrance so that we can recall them when we need them for your sake, Jesus. We pray in